Hey, good morning. I'm that developer dad. My name is Rob, and we're building a dotNet application from scratch. We're about a week and a half in, and so far we've defined our problem space, we've developed our static architecture, we've created one of the components with a full suite of tests that we can run whenever we want to, and we've moved into creating the contracts for the actual application that an end user will eventually interact with. We're building a townsfolk generator for my D&D game. My players keep asking me, so what's the blacksmith's name, and what do they look like, and what's their personality like, and do they have any kids? Why are they angry? All of those things. And I'm not good at ad-libbing at all. So I figure, hey, what if I make a program that can help answer some of those questions with the push of a button? And so that's what we're doing these days. I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code in just a second here, and I'll share my screen while that's opening. Give me a moment. Here we go. And we'll pop over to the other view. Click. All right. So last night, or yesterday afternoon, when we finished off for the day, we had a bunch of extra stuff down here in the what is a townsperson and how do we generate them. And so what I did is, let's go to GitHub. We'll come down here to that repository. This is a public repository hosted at github.com/thatdeveloperdad. Right there. And the repository is gm_tools for anybody that wants to follow along. Now, I added some things to the project plan. We've got define a generalized game statistics abstraction. We're going to need to do that eventually. We're not going to do that today. We may not even get to that this week. Right now, we are defining the public contract, or we're not going to define the public contracts. These are to-dos that we need to do. And these fall in here. Today, we're creating the contracts for the townsfolk manager. Now, within the actual repository itself, I added a couple more things for future enhancements or things that we might want to do later on, such as fleshing out detailed personality traits and descriptions. That, I think, is a job for a large language model or an AI. We may or may not get to that as part of the minimum viable product that we're doing. Another one is creating an abstraction for the concept of an adventuring class. That's outside the scope of generating basic townsfolk. So we're going to leave those outside of this MVP project, and we'll come back to them at another time. And I didn't successfully share my screen. Here we are. So abstracting out what an adventuring class looks like, we're not going to do that as part of this project. Using an AI to flesh out personality traits, appearance descriptions, stuff like that, we might make that part of the MVP, but that largely depends on how much time the core functionality takes. And that's just to get bullet point, single word, like keywords and phrases and so on, populated into these into the properties of a townsperson. Let's take a look at the code. So we've got our manager over here. It's responsible for calling out to, or it's responsible for generating our townsperson, sending a townsperson that we've generated to be saved to some storage location, retrieving one of those townspeople, and then listing them. And it does all of that stuff by using other components that we've already identified for our system. We will have, obviously, our dice engine so that we can generate random numbers and roll dice and all that good stuff that we need to do when we're playing a TTRPG. We're going to need access to wherever we're storing these townsfolk. And then we're going to need access to the rule set, which lists out the different choices for things that we have. And for those choices as we make them, they may have an impact on other attributes of our townsperson as we build them up. And we're going to talk about some ideas I've had for how we're going to apply those things as we get to them. For now, let's get back to defining this townsfolk manager. Well, we have the townsfolk manager over here. We need to get back to defining the townsperson. I've got this in, we'll just put this over here in another window. We've got our given name, the family name, the species, their appearance, and the appearance has so many things that are gonna be common to not just townspeople, but player characters, other NPCs, creatures that the party might run into at some point on their adventures. So I pulled that concept out and I put that into a framework library called GameTools.Framework, and we have concepts, and we have character appearance, integument kind. That's a new word to me, is sort of an SAT word. And integument is like hair, scales, feathers, the stuff that grows out of your skin. The medical terminology for integument also refers to it as skin or hide or what have you. But I figured skin, hide, things like that, we can count those under skin color, etc. I just wanted to have a descriptor for creatures that have hair or scales or feathers, or sometimes they might have bark in the case of treants, or people that are evolved from plant life or what have you. But right now we're just interested in listing out all of the different attributes of a townsperson. So we've gotten through that. And let's start focusing on profession. Then we'll do background and personality. We're just going to store a couple of strings in there. So profession. I think maybe, no, let's just code it. Public string, profession, name, get, set. And is profession really the right thought for that. I think perhaps vocation. And is profession something a little bit more complex? I think it is. So let's character vocation. Escape. I did something incorrect, probably. Add new file. We're going to make it a class. Character vocation. Okay. Let's go ahead and make this sealed, because we don't want to inherit from it. We can always unseal it later if we have to. And public string name for the vocation, public string array, skills, and for now we're just going to call that, we're just going to use a string list for these skills. We might have to alter that later. Public string title for apprentice, journeyman, master, grandmaster, etc., etc. And public int, I'm going to say decimal, length of career. Save. Does age go into appearance? I'm second guessing myself here. Now, public string skills, I like returning arrays, but I don't like manipulating them at runtime, because you got to redimension them and reallocate the memory space and all that stuff. So instead of this, we're going to do something a little different. For now, we'll just do a new string array so the compiler doesn't bark at me while I type out what I'm going to do. But let's do this. Private read only list of string skills we'll initialize that to an empty list of strings here, and we need to give initial values to those string variables. Otherwise, the compiler will complain at us. So let's go with name equals string.empty, title equals string.empty, length of career equals decimal 0.0. And that's all we need for character vocation. Now we've got an error message down here, but that's okay. All we're going to do is we're going to take skills, our list, which is a whole lot easier to work with at runtime, and we're going to convert that to an array. There we go. Now, instead of vocation being a string, vocation is going to be a character vocation. And that's going to hide all of that stuff in there. Now, I had second guessed my putting the age attribute into appearance. I think I want to move age out if it's in here. Age in years, yeah. Yeah, I do. So we're just going to cut this from here. Townsperson, character appearance. We're going to put age in years right here as an attribute of our townsperson. So we've got an appearance, a vocation. Let's see about background. We're also going to need to instantiate that vocation. Right up here in our default constructor. Otherwise, if we say, give me a new townsperson, and I start trying to assign to this vocation, and it doesn't have a value, the application's going to panic and fall down and cause all kinds of problems and crash our application. I don't want that. Background. I think this is another sort of generic thing that can be used elsewhere. Let's go ahead and add that as a framework concept. Let's add a new class, character background. There we go. Let's make it static. And we've got, well, first let's make a constructor. We don't need these parameters. Why is it complaining? Static class. I don't want a static class, silly thing. We want sealed. Okay. Now our background has a name. Let's assign it string.empty. It'll have a description. So will profession, come to think of it. Won't it? Or vocation, rather. Public string description get set. Save that. So we've got a description Now in D&D 5e, we've got some attributes, some character attributes that are descended from, that come from the background. They've got, and I'd have to review the material, but there's like bonds, like character bonds, character flaws, and there's a third thing, and I can't remember what it is. And those sort of help define the character's personality from a role-playing perspective. So I've called those things over in my comments the personality seeds. I think I want to use that same concept, but I need something a little bit more flexible. So instead of just having a list of strings, I think what I want to do is create a dictionary. So we're going to go private read only. And this I've used read only here a couple of times, and I want to describe what I mean by that, or what the implications of making a private variable read only are. And I'll do that as soon as I'm done typing this line. And this is just going to be a string of strings. And this is going to be personality. I'm going to say traits. Save. And sometimes a background will grant skills. Let's put that back in here. Private read only. This is going to be a list of strings, and it's going to give us skills. We're getting some compiler warnings. So traits equals new dictionary string string. Skills equals a new list of string. And let's review what this read only means. So I could have made a const up here at the top, which basically just means it's a constant value, but that's not quite what I want. What we need to do is we want to ensure that when we're working with an instance of the character background class, that some well-meaning developer who isn't intimately familiar with the code can't say this character background dot traits equals and then assign it a brand new dictionary of keyword description or a brand new list of skills. We don't want to overwrite the entire collection, but we do want to be able to add and remove items from these collections. So what we do is we declare it as a private variable on the class, which means nothing outside the class can see it, and we mark it as read only. And what that means is that we can only assign to that variable when we're inside a constructor method. That's the only time we can do a direct assignment like this. We need to expose these things. So we're going to expose traits like that, and we're going to public string array of skills is skills.toArray, just like we did up top. Now, over on our vocation class, we're exposing our skills and we're defining an empty set of skills. And I just noticed this hole, or I realized that I had a gap here as I was coding the background. We don't have a way of adding skills. So let's do this. Public void add skill, string skill. All we do is just do a skills.add skill. And because we're doing a build-up, we're not going to be removing skills. So we don't need to worry about that at this point. So there's character vocation fixed up. Public void add skill. And skills.add skill. Now, some of you who are a little bit more experienced in software development are seeing me repeating myself. And if you're familiar with SOLID principles, SOLID is an acronym, SOLID. The D stands for don't repeat yourself. And I've just repeated myself. Well, I've added the same backend property and the same backing variable, the same property with the same pattern. But there is no guarantee at this point in our development that these concepts are going to remain identical. Yes, they look the same right now, but as we work on our system, we might discover that skills as granted by a background are significantly different from the skills that are granted by a vocation. So don't repeat yourself. Yes, you don't want to use the exact same code for the exact same reason with the exact same context in multiple places throughout your system. However, at this stage of the game where we're just sketching, it's okay to have some things that look the same. Because I expect that as we develop, these concepts are going to diverge as these contexts evolve. Otherwise, absolutely, I might create a skilled character base that just has those skills and inherits from that skilled character base. But I don't think that's necessarily something that we want to deal with yet. So there's our character background, our character appearance. Let's bring the background onto our townsperson. Public character background. And let's just call it background. Get set. Now you see here that I did a private set down here on appearance. Let's do private sets on these as well, because I don't want these overwritten from outside the context of the instance. Private set. And we can go background equals new character background. Everything's happy. Given name, family name, species, age in years. We've got our appearance, subspecies may or may not have a value. And then finally, we are to personality. And let's, I think we define personality as having a nature and a demeanor. And I think public string personality get set. I think instead of just having raw personality, I want to do personality nature. Do I have snippets here? I do. String, personality, demeanor. And we need to initialize those values up top. Now, we need to add some comments around some of these more arcane things that we're dealing with here. Like appearance, okay, vocation, all right. Character background, all right, we got that. Personality nature. What is the character like in their inner world? Yeah, coding autocomplete. Yeah. Go away. Go away. In their inner world. And I'm borrowing this concept from the old White Wolf games like Werewolf and Vampire the Masquerade and Mage the Ascension and stuff like that. I really, really like spelling things correctly. No, I really like the concept of the characters in the world having what they're really like who they really are, and what they show to the world around them. How does the character present themselves to others? I.e., once you get to know them, what are they like? Is character like in their inner world? Once you get to know them, what are they like? Yeah, okay, those are good. How did they grow up? What impacts has this background had on their life, worldview, and personality? What does the character do? We may end up expanding background to include things like parents, clan, if they have children, etc., etc. But for now, nah, I don't think we need any of that. So we've got given name, family name, species, appearance, vocation, background, personality, nature, personality, demeanor. we've got all these attributes. And that's pretty cool. I think before we worry about displaying, or before we worry about filling any of these things in, I think we want to talk about how we're going to display those on perhaps a screen. So we're going to be returning our Townsperson contract to the caller. And let's make sure our console client has the correct reference. We're already referencing the Townsfolk manager. Great. So I'm going to be super lazy here on this client for now. But before we get into this, implicit usings, goodbye. Get lost. I don't like you. First thing we got to do, using system, so that we have access to our console namespace is console client class program I might have to make that public. Usually when I'm in Visual Studio, I set it to not use top level statements because I like to have things nice and explicit. Void main. Let's not take in any args. And we need a Townsfolk manager. Need to add convert to top level statements. No, I don't want top level statements. What even is it doing? Generator equals new Townsfolk manager. What's this complaining about? Townsfolk manager could not be found. Nonsense. Public class, Townsfolk manager, yeah. That's the project file, you silly goose. Using GameTools dot Townsfolk manager. Here we go. Now, let's generate a single Townsperson. And I don't want to do npc.toString. Well, let's do npc.toString just for laughs. Let's pop out this, run and debug. I don't want to do dice test console. I want to do console client. Go. And it's going to run all of this stuff, building, doing the things. It's running. And by calling npc.toString, all it does is print out the type name of that variable. So that's not very good at all. I'm not in love with that, not even a bit. So, static void print NPC. It's going to take in an NPC. And the reason I'm putting this in a separate method is because this code might get a little ugly. Or I should say, I know it's going to get ugly. We don't want to pass the string. We want to pass the whole variable. We are also going to need using System.Text.Json. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it has become the preferred way of serializing complex objects. So we're going to convert that NPC object into a JSON object. And that JSON manifests as a simple string. NPC JSON equals JSON serializer.serialize NPC, and then we're just going to console.writeLine that JSON. And it's, I promise you, this is going to be ugly. Now, rather than run through the UI like this, I want a little bit more control, or not necessarily more control, but less garbage on the screen. So we're going to open a new terminal at this folder. Here we are. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And I want to say .NET run. And it's building and is doing the things. And okay, so we see all these attributes. Doesn't really look all that great, does it? No, it does not. That's not going to be useful to me at all. So we'll just shrink that down. We don't need that Finder window. We don't need that Finder window. Go away. How are we going to make this look less crappy? Var options equals new JSON serializer options. And we should be able to JSON serializer defaults.general web options token type value kind. Yeah. Where's the right indented? Is there a right indented? I can never remember the exact syntax for this. So off to Copilot we go. Just a brief detour. How do I set up JSON serializer options to write indented in .NET 8 using C#? This is way faster than Googling. And Copilot's going off and doing the Googling for me. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's enough. Oh, we can also do JSON convert. Oh, that's the older JSON convert from Newtonsoft. I've gotten out of the habit of using Newtonsoft because I've run into NuGet package purgatory way too many times because of that particular package. Um, for a long time, in the late 2000s through late 20 teens, everything imported Newtonsoft, every project, and keeping the versions of that package that were referenced by every project in your solution became a huge pain in the neck. And it'd break builds and cause deployment problems, and sometimes it'd deploy okay, but it'd crash at runtime. And I sort of started falling away from using Newtonsoft, especially when I transitioned from full dotNet framework to dotNet Core or the newer modern dotNets. And once dotNet 7 released a few years ago, the JSON serializer that's built into the dotNet framework sort of caught up feature-wise with Newtonsoft. So this is what we want. We want to set up our new JSON serializer options, but instead of passing these things in through the constructor call like I tried to do, we're going to set it like this. Equals true. And I believe that's the right syntax. Let's double check. Right indented equals true. Good. Shrink that back down to the doc. We've got all of our stuff, and now we need to provide these options to the serializer. Calm down. Jeepers. I really love copilots and coding assistants and stuff like that. They help me out a lot when I'm doing stuff that's weird. But by golly, when I know what I want to type, I wish it had stopped trying to butt in. All right, so we've got that. We're all saved. Let's rebuild here. And then we should be able to come out here, rerun from here. And look at this. That's a whole lot easier to see. Like that's almost useful. Be a whole lot more useful if we had some values in there. But we've got a pretty decent view of what this generated NPC is going to look like. So let's start thinking about how we populate those things. We've answered our question. What do we need to know about a townsperson? Now you'd think a generated NPC is an awful lot to type. So I'm going to rename that to NPC. Anybody familiar with the gaming domain knows exactly what an NPC is. I don't feel like I need to type out generated non-player character every time I'm referencing this variable. You'd think that we could just pick the given names and the family names from generic random lists, but I've never met an elf named Flint Rockcrusher. It's not to say that I can't, but it's unlikely. So I think our name lists are probably going to be tied to species or perhaps even subspecies. Now we're going to need to pick our species, and I think that comes first. npc dot species equals, gosh, I don't know. For now, let's make an elf. And yeah, we're hard coding. Assign the species. Name, subspecies, and appearance all derive from the species. So we've got species, subspecies, naming lists, appearance. Okay. So now we need to start thinking about rule sets. And that is sort of a complex topic. We're not quite sure of all of the generic conceptual things that come from that are common between different tabletop role-playing games. But we've got a basic clue. We've got rule set access. And I remember when we first did our static design, we should be able to see it here. Let's make that bigger. We've got a component that's going to access rule sets for us. And our rule set data, we're going to hard code this into its own assembly as a collection of basically classes with hard coded values in them. Now, so that we can get some consistency from one species to the next within a given rule set, we're going to want to do something like a template that when an item that when a templated item is selected from a list of these different templates, we can take the attributes and use those to apply the attributes granted by that template to the character that we're building. Hey, morning, Algrave. One of my players just popped into the stream just in time for me to talk about the gushy mechanical insides of how game design actually works. I have never been part of a game design studio, but I've played enough role-playing games over the past almost 40 years that there's common processes and ways of doing things within these different rule sets. So we need rule set access, and then we also need another assembly to act as the rule set resource. And that means we need a new solution folder. And I'm going to call it rule sets. And to this rule sets, I'm going to add a new project that is a class library. And it's going to be called D&D 5e SRD. And we're going to call it GameTools dot ruleset dot. Boom. Project will be created in, all right, source rule sets. Yep, that's named correctly. Let's create our project. Excuse me. Now our rule set access and our townsperson, this is actually a character designed for 5e. But let's not mess with that just yet. For now, I want to define and that's GameTools.ruleset, ruleset access. We are going to add a folder called contracts. There we go. We are not going to assign, or we're not going to reference our 5e SRD rule set from rule set access. We are instead going to reference this rule set from our console client. Yes. We're going to add a project reference. And we're going to cheat and do this as a project reference for now. If we turn this into an API or a more complex, robust, or more complex system, I might have a different way of pulling rule sets in from the file system and registering them with the GameTools application. For now, we're just going to create a dependency from console client out to our specific rule set. And that's all we're going to do. And we're going to, not yet. We need to define these things. So this class is going to become species data. And describes the species that are available when creating characters and provides access to their attribute templates. Public string array no. Now you're seeing me do something here that you haven't seen me do before. And this is going to be a dictionary of string and string. list species. Returns a dictionary of species as and their short description. Species with a short description. Of each. And I don't think I necessarily want to, yeah, we'll use a dictionary of string. A dictionary string where the key is the species name and the value is a short description. Return new dictionary string, and it's just going to be empty for now. Public species template get species template string species name. We don't have a species template, but species template certainly seems like something that would apply to lots of things. Lots and lots of things. Like regardless of which game system we're in. So just before we go, I'm going to add a new file called species template over here. It didn't like that because I didn't say I'm adding a class. Add new file. Come on. Class template. Boom. All right. There's our species template. And that's in rule set access. I put that in the wrong place. New project, class library, rule set. Nope. GameTools dot rule set dot definitions. The reason I am abstracting these class types and such out to their own project is because the rule set access needs to understand the structure of a rule set. Our individual rule sets also need to implement those structures. And our access obviously needs to be able to query and read from the defined sets of rules. So species template, you're leaving here. Whoops, I don't want to delete it. I want to cut it. It's not going to let me. Will it let me drag it? It will. Maybe. Come on. Nope, it's not. That's okay. We're going to delete it. Goodbye. Yes. And let's just rename this to species template. Bonk. We'll close this one. Species data, species template. Our D&D 5e SRD needs a reference to our rule set definitions. We're using those damn top level, using GameTools dot rule set dot definitions. It really doesn't like that, does it? Typer namespace definitions does not exist in the namespace. GameTools dot rule set. Oh, this thing's silly. Maybe we have to build it. Build? Let's copy this out of here. We'll come over here and we'll paste it over here. And it doesn't like that at all because it needs the word using, and there's definitions. Species data, where are you? Why are you complaining? Species template. Generate class. It's right here. Oh. There's that. Save it. Get species template. Return new species template. And I'm going to have to clean up this definitions because we are going to have type definitions and we're going to have behavior definitions. And I'm going to want separate namespaces for those. So I'm going to do that refactoring in between now and our afternoon stream. And our species data over here. This is going to implement one of those behavioral things. And then maybe this afternoon we might talk a little bit about dependency injection once I get this stuff cleaned up and structured the way it needs to be. And you see that we're adding new quasi components here. These aren't really components. These are projects that support the concept of being able to access a flexible volatile rule set. So these, the definitions project, I include that with rule set access. The D&D 5e SRD project, I include that as the rule set resource. So there's not really any need to call those out on our static conceptual diagram just yet. I am not going to check these changes in to our source control just yet. I'll do that this afternoon. But for now, I think we've reached a good stopping point, and I'll be back at 1 p.m. Eastern Time right here on Twitch, and we'll carry on with fleshing out the concept of having a list of species, and then we're going to pick one of these lists of species randomly and apply that to our townsfolk manager. From there, we'll be able to flesh out the template and get all of those other attributes. And I think we're going to start with one or two, maybe three species, or maybe just their names. And then we'll keep fleshing out from there as we go. But for now, I do need to split for a little while. I got some real world stuff to do, and we'll get back to this afternoon. So until then, take care, everybody, and we will see you all again soon, I hope.